This dude right here has reached manhood. Boys become men after they've spent 3 or 4 decades in the boyhood desert, paradoxically both feeding and trying to slay the bad wolf inside him at the same time. He was recently released from prison, spending the better part of a decade locked up. After a lifetime of trauma, he chose meth and heroin over everything else. Finally, he chose prison. Finally, he chose maturity. Recently, I was going to buy him some work boots or whatever he could use, and he declined. I tried to hand him a $100 bill, and he declined it. He smiled and said, "I can't take anything from anyone. It isn't good for me." He has maybe 20 years of learning in his last 5. He developed a pit bull rescue and rehabilitation program and managed 63 men, helping them all obtain their GEDs. Join me for the story of a man who chose prison in order to be free.
If you're a man that controls his own destiny, a man that is always in the pursuit of being better, you are in the right place. You are responsible. You are strong. You are a leader. You are a force for good. Gentlemen, you are the Alpha, and this is the Alpha Quorum.
Welcome back to the Alpha Quorum Show. Brad Singletary here. I'm super excited about our guest today, who is actually a family member. This is my 35-year-old nephew, and we've just been reacquainted. It's been several years. We'll get into why that is, but I spent some time with his family a couple of weeks ago, and it had been quite a while since I've seen this guy. In fact, right about the amount of time that I've been working on the Alpha Quorum. So the intent of all that we're doing is to try to strengthen men. And the way that men become stronger is to have other strong men around them. And this is a guy who I've seen through all of his youthful, juvenile, garbage type stuff. Now I see him as this maturing man who's seriously got his head on his shoulders. And I'm just very thankful to have you here, Andy. Gentlemen, please welcome Andy Giddings.
Hey, what's up, buddy?
Hey, tell us about yourself, man.
So I'm 35. I live in Idaho Falls. I've got 6 kids, and I'm a full-time contractor. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Tell them why I didn't see you for a few years.
So I was in prison. Of the last 6 years, I've been in prison for 5 years. For a myriad of charges between drug charges and white collar crimes. Been in and out of the system for the better part of a decade. And when you go to prison, I mean, it's one of those things where you're kind of detached from the world. So
talk about what got you there, man. So this is one of my favorite things to do, and that's to see men who have created some difficulty for themselves and found their way out of that. So tell us what took you to prison. How'd you get there?
So in 2014, I became a full-time entrepreneur. I was starting and buying businesses, and by 2017, I found myself under investigation for some dumb decisions I had made, at the beginning part of the year and in that ass end of 2016. I started using heroin and meth in the end of 2016. And once I started using drugs, I started making bad decisions. And so eventually I was arrested for possession of meth, possession of heroin, grand theft, burglary, and digital forgery. So
Good night. How many felonies is that?
That's 5 felonies and there were 4 other felonies that got dropped in the plea deal, but I got 5 felony convictions.
Wow. So you talked about some drug use. When we met a couple of weeks ago here, you talked about how short-lived that was. What led you to that in the first place? I mean, how do you go from, Idaho Falls kid, father of six to meth and heroin?
So as I mean, I had a fucked up childhood in a lot of ways. I had a great mom and, great family members, but there was a lot of things that were fucked up the whole way. And, um, you know, I never did drugs or alcohol or any of that stuff when I was an adolescent. I might have lied about it to sound cool, but the reality of it is I just internalized all that bullshit, all that pain, all that hurt, and it never came out. And so in my late 20s, I was married to a woman that had a previous heroin addiction that had relapsed. And I suffered from all sorts of mental issues that I wasn't even aware of at the time. One of which was abandonment, shame, or abandonment and shame were two, I guess. And when I found out that I had to give her an ultimatum to either stop using or leave, in my mind, that wasn't even an option. I couldn't lose her, right? And so I was like, well, fuck it. If she won't quit, then I'll just start using with her, and then we'll quit together, and then maybe she'll quit. And it's kind of a skewed way to think about it. I mean, I don't know why I went down that road, but yeah, I would have rather been a heroin addict than lose my wife. And so I went down that rabbit hole, and I barely made it out. So
Wow. What are some of the things that you talked about? There were some childhood things or whatever, like things were kind of fucked up for you there. What do you mean? The reason I ask is just to there's dudes out there listening to this stuff who haven't come as far as you have, and um, share whatever you feel like feel comfortable sharing.
yeah, man. So I'm pretty. I'm an open book. I don't really care if people hear my story. I mean, I've told it 10,000 times in prison to dudes trying to help them. You know, early on, I mean, there was physical and sexual abuse, um, and then I didn't really realize it until in my mid to late teens. Like there was a ton of emotional and mental abuse as well, just mental torture, and so but probably the thing that affected me the most was um the things, and I won't go into great detail on this because my mom's probably going to watch this, but um some of the shit that I witnessed my dad do to other people was fucking heinous, and that scarred me for life. And so, you know witnessing all those things, and then having to uproot and move because of the monster that is my biological father, and like going from place to place, having dudes knock on our door in the middle of the night with a shotgun ready to kill my dad because he molested one of their kids. Uh, and just story after story. And so, on top of that, we're from the South. I've got a Southern draw, and I'm fat and I'm poor. So, we moved to Utah. I get bullied like a motherfucker because I'm Southern and fat and poor. And I'm part of the Giddings family, which you either loved them or you hated them in that town. And then my mom eventually got divorced. We relocated, went to Salt Lake for like 6 months. I got bullied and beat up there. Relocated to Vegas, same thing. But now we live in a black neighborhood. We live in North Vegas. And uh, yeah, I was the fat, poor white kid. I mean, even though we lived in like, we lived in an all right house and stuff, like the population at the school was, ghetto kids. And yeah, when you're the fat white kid in a North Vegas school, like you don't get good treatment. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So take us up to when so you started using heroin and thinking that you were going to kind of save her through that. Like, okay, I'll just join you. If you can't beat them, join them. And then I'm going to pull us both out of that. What kind of things, how did all that spiral from there?
So that first shot of heroin, man, like, so heroin is a downer, right? It's an opiate. Uh, but my first shot of heroin, she did it. I went straight to the needle. That's how she administered it. And she wouldn't stop. So I was like, well, fuck it, I'll do it. She's like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, but I need you to hit me though. And so she gave me the shot. And I remember thinking like, oh, this isn't like that crazy because it was a small shot. It was a small amount. But then it was it was a type of feeling I've never had before. And I wasn't really hooked, but I was spun up, which was weird on a downer because my brain had never had that. And so I was up all night because I was a chatterbox. And then I was like, well, see, that's not that bad. I'm not going to get addicted to that. So the next night, I used it at night. I was running an indoor shooting range and a bakery at the time. And I also had a physical training or a personal training business that I did part time. And I was, a closet user for a few weeks, and it was like intermittent, like, there's intervals of use over the next few weeks. And I remember the first time I got sick, it kind of scared me. I was like, oh, fuck, here we go. Like, this is what everyone talks about. And I did a bigger shot with a larger amount. And that was the real heroin high that, I don't know, that you get hooked to. And then I remember that's when I was okay with my addiction setting in. And the heroin addiction only lasted about 4 months. It was just a few months. And then I was sick one time. And I was at the bakery one night and
I
I
think you
was,
drawing.
yeah, I was withdrawing. Because the more you use, the shorter the windows get of, feeling well. And so this kid that I would get stuff from, uh, he he said he had some clear, and I was like, well, I don't fuck with meth. Like, I was a heroin user, not a meth user, like, and I thought I was better than them. And he came to the bakery. I did a shot of meth for the first time, and it was the best thing that I ever hit my brain. And I immediately quit doing heroin and switched to meth, and then that's when everything got really messy. So,
Like what?
oh man,
Like
so
criminal stuff started?
so yeah, man, I started using on August 28th of 2016, and by let's see. No, I'm sorry. I started using on October 28th, 2016, and by June of 2017, I lost the largest five-star indoor shooting range in the state. I lost my bakery, I lost my house, I lost three cars, and I lost custody of six kids.
Wow.
And literally less than a year, man. And then the week after the eclipse, my wife was arrested on warrants, and then a month later, I was arrested on warrants, and then it just went downhill from there. But I built this life. I mean, I was talking to my mom and my grandpa, your dad, and getting advice from them. I was getting ready to buy an assisted living center. I was co-owner in the gun store. I was owner of the bakery, owner of Elite Training and Nutrition, owner of Business Development Group. I had a beautiful home, nice cars. I mean, everything. And I busted my ass through my 20s to get that. But what I didn't realize is that, I mean, I was working 100 to 120 hours a week, literally. I mean, never sleeping, never spending time with my kids. And I was addicted to my work. And I used my work to keep myself out of my own thoughts because I've never been to counseling. To this day, I've never been to counseling.
What the hell, man?
I know. Hey, look, man, I know. I was always that hard knock that's going to figure it out. I thought depression was bullshit until I went to prison. Um, got education of my own on that. I thought it was make believe, you know, and I thought it was a scapegoat, you know, and yeah, I was an asshole. Nobody liked me. I didn't have any friends. I didn't want them. I just wanted to work, and uh, so anyways, yeah, I built this life, and my kids weren't even happy before the drugs because they never saw me, you know, and then after the drugs, they were even more unhappy and scared and confused because they didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
They were they were so young, and so um, yeah.
So, did you believe that there was some benefit? Obviously, you thought these drugs were doing some good for you or something like um, talked
Oh
about
yeah,
talked about that a little bit earlier or when we met a couple weeks ago that, kind of did something for you.
yeah, man. So I mean, I don't remember what movie it was with The Rock in it, but he's this big jacked up CIA agent, and he looks in the mirror and he's that fat kid from high school. Man, and like that's real shit. And from a clinical standpoint, I'm sure you know that. Like, there's body dysmorphia and all this other stuff. Like even today, I have an 8 pack abs, and I can run. I mean, I'm literally a superior athlete in a lot of ways, but I am so self conscious. I won't take my shirt off in front of people. Like I won't. I think, you know, I've got this weird thing, man, from being super fat and picked on when I was a kid, and bullying is probably the thing that fucked me up the most. Yeah, man, it's
So you
uh,
start losing weight. I guess you start losing weight and feeling more confidence, and you felt like
well,
that must.
it was so it wasn't until I started using meth. It was rewiring my brain, and I could look in the mirror and I see somebody different, and you know, you shoot up meth, and it's not that you're losing weight. It's not that, you know, and I didn't lose weight because of that either. I lost weight when everyone hated ketosis and doctors said that's going to kill you.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know,
you were doing that before. You were doing training and stuff.
yeah, yeah. So that's how I lost the weight. And shit, people commit or accused me of doing meth back then because, I mean, I became obsessed over it. Like I was working out 6 to 7 hours a day on 3 different occasions, and I wasn't eating anything besides lettuce and chicken breast plain for 7 months.
Oh my God.
And yeah, I mean, and so I was obsessed over fitness for a while. But anyways, so like when I started using meth, I didn't see that fat pussy anymore that got picked on by the homies in the hood, or that got beat up by his dad. I didn't see that dude that was afraid. Meth took that out of my brain, and I would lie to people, and I don't know. I mean, when I was growing up, I had a problem with lying all the time, and I think everybody in my family knew that. Like it was a thing, and I never thought about it until I went to prison. But it was like an identity thing. Like I was so afraid all the time, and I was so ashamed of myself all the time because I thought I was always fucking up because of the things my dad would say to me or beat me for or whatever. And so I was just ashamed of who I was. So I would lie to try and be someone else. And eventually I grew out of that. But then when I started using meth, it was that feeling again of like, I can be whoever I want. I can detach myself from the people who know me, find a new group of people, and I am whoever I say I am to them. And you can you can it's almost like chat rooms and shit. You can be whoever you want to be when you find a new group of people. And so you re-identify yourself. And the bad part with that was my new identity. I mean, your identity is what your behaviors happening over and over again, and that's who it's like the credentials of what you've done to build yourself, right? And I I mean, I knew what it was to be hood. You know what I mean? I grew up in Vegas, like in Salt Lake and shit. Like I knew what was up, and so now that my brain is getting rewired, my meth use was okay. I didn't care about the damage that I was doing because I finally felt better.
You felt good. You feel this kind of this counterfeit strength, confidence, or whatever, and it
Yeah,
didn't matter if it was, you know, messing up other parts of your life.
yeah, because for the first time in 30 years, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't ashamed of what other people saw. And it's like when you're standing on a big black dot, all you can see in 360 degrees is a black surface, and you don't really know what you're standing on, but the people on the outside can see it and they're begging you to get off of it. Does that make sense? Like,
I like that visual.
yeah, man. And so like I'm standing on this big black dot. I can't see anything, and but I'm comfortable. You know what I mean? Like, and I was homeless. I went from, dude, I made six figures the last honest year I was out, and I earned every damn penny of it. And less than a year later, I was homeless, living in a rental car, and I was happy. I mean, because I wasn't afraid of my father. I wasn't afraid of letting anyone down. I'd already let them down, so fuck them. I'm going to stay down. Like that was my attitude. And then once I got sober for the first time and went to jail and stuff, yeah, I didn't snap out of that weird mindset for a year. I'd never read a book. Now, this is weird too. Like I've never read a book cover to cover until I went to county jail. First book I read was The Giver. Uh, the second book I read was Sapiens.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, and so like that, honestly, man, my brain was still, I was doing so much meth intravenously that it took me like 18 months, 20 months to get my head right. But reading those books in a weird mind state or a weird state of mind uh, changed the paradigm of my thinking to where like it set the ball in motion for who I became today. But unfortunately, I had two relapses in between then and now. But yeah.
So you did a couple stints in prison, or more than one. I mean, you would go out and come back, violate parole or whatever, and how many trips did you take back?
So the first time I went was for 2 years total. Got out, was out for 60 days, but I knew I was going to use when I got out. I knew I wasn't done. I knew because it's going to the prison, going to the yard and stuff. Uh, that's an incubator for you know for all sorts of shit, gangs and Hep C and all sorts of weird shit and dumb shit. And uh, I became obsessed with fitness again. Um, and eventually I stopped working out with people because I kept getting roped into dumb shit. And so I stopped working out with people and kind of did that Sigma thing where I just, did my own thing. And I mean, I obsessed over it. And I would almost get in fights with people if they interfered with what I was doing. And then one day I was reading Can't Hurt Me. I read that in like 2 days. And I was so pumped, dude. I was like driven, like he says, I was driven to be a more of a badass. And like everything he said about being addicted to pain and coming from a bad place and instead of running from the pain or trying to fix it, you embrace it and you grow from it. So yeah, you can't crack a broken foundation. And so I wrote a lot too. I would bang out thousands of words a day. If I couldn't come up with something, I'd write about some weird shit, some Mad Hatter shit. But most of the time, I wrote about pain because I looked at the house that I was building, and I was building a house on gravel. Everything's broken and fucked up. So whatever, we're just gonna build it anyways. And that didn't work out for me because between the fitness and the writing and the deep thinking I was always doing, a month from the gate, I asked myself, I'm like, hey man, so what are you gonna do? You gonna use? You're gonna what are you gonna do? You be there for your kids? What? And it wasn't a half a second, and I knew that I was going to use again because I thought at that time like I was strong enough to be a weekend warrior or to use every so often or whatever. And at this point, Kayla's in prison. My wife at the time was in prison. I'm in prison. The kids have been taken away. Three of them have been taken to another state. My family doesn't talk to me. Like it's just me. And so I slept in, or I slept, I slipped into the toxic mindset of saying, well, fuck it. If you're going to be alone, you're going to do whatever you want. And I stopped working out 2 weeks from the gate. I contacted a few of the people in the game and I got dropped off at a halfway house in Idaho Falls. And I was high 24 hours later.
Wow.
And it was off to the races. And I don't even remember. I think honestly, it was probably like 80 days, 90 days, something like that. I was in jail again. And
The UA or what?
no, I told him every time he would say, hey, my PO would call me. He's like, hey, what are you doing? I was like, not much. He's like, you getting high? I was like, absolutely. You know, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. I mean, I didn't lie to him. I didn't run from him. Uh, I just didn't care. I was like, what are you gonna do about it? Like, come get me. You know where I'm at. Like, that was my attitude. So he sent me to a rehab, and oh god, dude, I was getting high every day at that place. We all were. And so at this point in my life, dude, I had only been an active meth user for like 120 days total. Because
Oh,
I got popped like a month after I started using meth or something like that. I mean, it wasn't very long. And I hadn't tested the waters of how much I could do, how much stress my brain could be put under. But this time out, right before I went down, I pushed it. I mean, I was doing so much that within 3 weeks of use, I couldn't get high anymore. And I remember one day I had to go check in with my PO. I had just done so much meth that it probably would have killed the average person. I mean, and then nothing happened. I didn't get high. My heart rate went up a little bit, and that was it. So I took a handful of Adderall 30s and I downed them. Nothing happened. I smoked a little bit of crack. Nothing happened. And so I'm tripping, like, oh my God, I'm going to have a stroke now. Like, I don't know. And so I went and told my PO, I'm like, hey, and I told him that story. I'm like, hey, this is what I just did this morning, but on my way here, I need help. He's like, perfect. Busted out his handcuffs and took me to jail. And yeah, so gets me to jail and I asked to go to prison. Um, I just, that scared me enough to where I wanted to go back. And now looking back, I felt safe in prison because I never had to worry about where I was going to eat. I didn't have to worry about my my family being afraid of me or judging me or being sad just looking at me because everybody there is in the same boat and we don't judge each other there. Not on that level. And so they let me out a year later, and it took 60 days Three of my friends died in 1 week. I'm going through relationship problems, whatever. And uh, I used it all as an excuse to get high again. Went on a runner, and my PO is very forward thinking at the time. She's now the head of probation and parole here, but I was her last case before she took over. And she's like, listen, she's like, look, I'm going to give you one shot at rehab to take it seriously, but we're going to send you out of town for rehab. And so she sends me to this rehab in the middle of nowhere, Idaho. Like, and she gives me the option. She's like, okay, you're going to be a big boy and take yourself, or do we need to take you? I was like, I can take myself. I've got a truck, you know? And so I get all my stuff. I'm high, you know, doing meth, tweaking. God, it takes me 24 hours to drive 4 hours, you know, because I keep like stopping and getting high and tweaking and flailing and just like tripping in this weird psychosis state. I've been up for 11 days. And I finally get to the rehab and they're like, fuck, no. Are you kidding me? Like, you're way too strong. Like, you need to go to jail first. So they call and tell my PO that. And she has me come back in. She gives me the option. She's like, all right, you can either come turn yourself in and we'll just do this now, or you can go to this rehab in Boise and they'll take you right now if you go right now. My mom offered to take me, and I don't know. I just said, fuck it, and got high one last time and turned myself in. And yeah, it was that moment. There were a lot of little details um, that led to that decision happening, like mainly to do with my kids, because when I got out, not this time that I'm out now, but before, like when that was happening, um, the first month I was out, I did really well. I reconnected with my kids. Um, you know, my girlfriend now, the woman that I'm with now, I was dating her back then when I was sober, and she was my best friend. She kind of helped keep me on the straight and narrow a little bit. Um, I don't know, and things were going really well. And so then when I fell off the wagon, uh, it broke my heart because my oldest daughter could see what was happening, and she, you know, and the kids heard the murmurs and stuff, uh, the murmurs from family members or whatever, you know what I mean? So they knew what was up. And so that's what ultimately led to me turning myself in. And then um, when I got there to county jail, I read a book called Extreme Ownership, and that changed my life. I mean, it really did. And then I read a children's book about writing, about being a novelist. Somebody had it, and I read it, and I thought that was cool as shit. And I dabbled with writing before, and so I was determined to write 10 to 15,000 words a day
Oh my gosh.
about
What was
nothing
that?
but gratitude and shame. That was it. Um, you know, and I'd seen a lot of speeches by Brene Brown about shame, and I've read some articles and stuff that she's written, and I think that's like um, the most looked over emotion we have, 100%. And I didn't even realize it was like an emotion until I read some of her stuff. But
Yeah,
so
people just walking around just loaded with so much shame. They don't even know what it is. They just get frustrated or irritated or they avoid something or they do the thing that's unhealthy, not realizing that the engine driving that is shame.
yeah, well, and like so I say I'm sorry about everything. You know what I mean? Like everything. It's annoying sometimes to people. Like, and so yeah, I didn't realize I struggled with that until I read all that stuff. Well, anyway, so I get back to county jail, and so I'm writing like crazy about shame and gratitude, and I'm working out all the time, and I'm obsessed over writing and fitness. Um, I mean, obsessed, bro. I mean, I broke a rib one day. I pushed myself so hard, I broke a rib. I had, fractures in my tibias from just going so hard in a 24-hour lockdown setting. I mean, we don't go outside. We don't have a track. This is county jail, right? And I mean, there's a large like Hispanic gang influence here. There's some white gangs and stuff, and it's very political in my county jail. And so you have to work out. If you want a bed, you have to work out. And so I was like, all right, run that, dude. Like, you fools can't keep up with me. I'll run the workout. And I mean, so I did. I got to the point where I was working out 3, 4 times a day, and I was writing for 12 hours a day. And so, um, and I thought that I was getting better. And I go in front of the judge, um, and I ask him, I'm like, look, I don't even want to be here. I don't want to do a program. I don't want to be put on paper. Like, I want to go to prison. I need some time. And at this point, I had like 3 years left. Um,
Do that.
so
You asked to go. You asked to go to prison.
yeah, because look, man, like, what am I going to do on the streets? I'm going to get high. I'm going to destroy my kids. I'm gonna kill myself. I'm gonna get killed. I mean, you know, I'm sitting in my truck, right? My family, I've got a good family. I mean, there's some fucked up shit that's happened in every family. I can't, we're not perfect by any means. I'm definitely the black sheep in my immediate family. But my mom gives me a truck when I get out, and I'm trafficking drugs in this truck, and I'm doing crazy shit in this truck instead of like using it as what it was, as a stepping stone to help me get back into the community. Fucking A, 30 days later, I'm sitting next to a homie with $40,000 and 10,000 fentanyl pills, and I don't even know what fentanyl is. I've never used it. That wasn't a thing when I started using. Like, it was, but it wasn't. And a week later, I've got so much meth in my truck going to whatever state just so I can do what? Get high and make like 3 grand. And then turns out that, yeah, I didn't realize, because I was so high all the time, I missed Christmas with my kids. My first Christmas back home, I missed with my kids.
Wow.
Um, yeah. And I mean, or I'm sorry, not Christmas, Thanksgiving. And then on Christmas, I just come back from a run, and I'm falling out because I've been up for 6 days. My kids are helping me open my presents. You know, Kimmy, my girlfriend, calls. She's like, "Hey, are you guys with your dad?" My oldest daughter answers and says, "Yeah, but he's tired. We're helping him open his gifts because he can't stay awake." And it's just heartbreaking. And like, you know, uh, yeah, man. So asking to go to prison was solely based on what I was doing to Kimmy and my kids and my mom. You know, uh, I remember
See
right
that
before.
to me right there. That becomes that in hearing this story. A lot, most of this for the first time myself, but right here in the story is where I'm hearing something's happening, some maturity. You realize you can't do it. You're saying, I need some time. Like, that will be good for me. I've done well in jail, in the county jail. So this is where some responsibility starts happening. You know what I mean? You are recognizing your limits, and you know that you're not gonna do well if you're not locked up. So that's some of the most badass shit I ever heard.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was definitely a level of maturity there, and I was falling in love with Kimmy too. Like, she's such an amazing person, man. And some of the things that she would talk to me about or tell me, I'm such an idiot. I thought she was a cop.
How
I was,
paranoid.
yeah, I was all paranoid. I thought she was a cop. I was like, this girl, there's no way that this cute ass girl is like, I don't know. Hey, I blocked her. She called me. I'm talking to this dude, and he's like, "Hey, bro, do you have $50 that I can borrow? Blah 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 for whatever." And he's just a using friend, a using buddy. This girl calls me, and she's like, "Hey, did you need $50?" And we're high on meth, so we're paranoid. And I'm like, "Oh God!" So we tore my truck apart looking for a bug, and I blocked her. And the reason why she said that was, I don't know, she found $50 or something, and it wasn't hers, and I don't know. Anyways, that poor girl's been through it with me too. But you know, so she is the one that put that seed in my head. She's like, maybe you just need a timeout. Maybe you just need to breathe. And where you're at right now, you can't breathe. And so then, boom, she left and blocked me, and we were over. And that resonated with me on a pretty deep level. Um, man, because every time I've been down, so the first time I was hyper focused on myself and on fitness, right? The second time I was hyper focused on teaching other people. So that time that I was down, I started a program where I taught dudes how to build websites. I got permissions to bring in these programs to teach dudes HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And so we would build websites. He would bring in free content from PBS. He would bring in free content, whatever I asked him for. So I built one website for Patagonia and their racing team. And he brought in a bunch of videos and stuff. And they turned it into a class called the School Web. And we built a closed network YouTube channel or website where dudes could get on there and watch pit bulls and parolees or watch oh, I don't even remember, a bunch of metalworking stuff, a bunch of stuff about cars and how to draw.
Handpicked channels or whatever where they allowed that let
Yeah, whatever content we wanted, he would bring in for us, and I would teach dudes how to build websites with the content. And it's still going today. They're still doing it. It's pretty cool. And I had a bunch of these younger kids at the facility I was at. There was a bunch of younger kids um, that were in there for like PCP and just dumb shit, dumb young college kid stuff. And I became like a mentor for these dudes. And everyone knew I wasn't going to relapse. Everyone knew I was going to be on the straight and narrow. And there's a dude that lives here in Idaho Falls today that calls me dad. He was 17 when we were in there. He took a bunch of PCP, ripped some stranger's house apart, and locked a girl in a closet. He just lost his mind. And I made such an impact on that dude at that time that he moved to Idaho Falls just to be closer to me, to have, that type of a mentor. But by the time he got here, I'd already relapsed and went back. And so this time I get back and I obsess over fixing the things that are fucked up inside of me. Because I knew, I don't know how, I don't know. I remember the moment when I had these initial thoughts. I was pretty high, but I remember I went to turn myself in, flipped around, boom, went back down Broadway, and I was just going to run. And then I remember I passed a friend's house, and I looked at the house, and I remember all of the sad moments that we had at that house. For us at the time, just a day in the life of being a drug dealer slash meth user slash whatever. And I remember thinking like how sad that was. And so I flipped back around. The sun's starting to go down. They'd been waiting for me for 30 minutes. They had closed their office already. I got there. I wrote all the phone numbers down to all the people that I would want to reach out to when I got to the jail. I scrounged up all the money I had, put it in my pockets so it could go on my books, and I went and turned myself in. Got there, went through the process, asked to go to prison, started obsessing over some stuff, got transferred to a state hold while beds opened up at the prison. And along the way, I was on this like evolutionary trajectory, but I wasn't getting a ton better. Coming off of meth, your brain doesn't work right. And then when you come off of meth and you go into like a gang environment, like a political environment in incarceration, you start taking on these weird behaviors, right? Political behaviors or whatever. And like, I'm kind of an asshole anyways sometimes. And I'm very like disciplined and strict and whatever. And so like that really came out of me at this point in time. Like, and if you were doing something, if a dude was doing something that pissed me off, or if he was working out in the workout area at my time, like we're fighting. And I don't know where that came from. Like I've always kind of been an asshole and like had some anger issues, but I've never been violent. And this time I was becoming violent. Um, and that's never happened before. It was very strange to me. Well, I go to the state hold in Pocatello, Idaho, and the coolest shit I've ever experienced in a county jail is these fools had podcasts and TED Talks. And I listened. I mean, so for $5 a month, you get your little tablet and you can listen to whatever you want. And um, that, dude, I listened to so many talks. And I heard David Goggins speak for the first time. I had only ever read his book before. I never heard his voice. And that was really cool. I listened to some audiobooks. I listened to Jocko Willink and Leif Babin or whatever, and listen to those dudes talk. Um, a lot of Jordan Peterson and stuff, and like I immersed myself in this, and then I found one by Will Smith that was the next turning point in my journey. That dude said, because I've always been like very obsessive with myself, very obsessive in what I'm doing. Like I was on food stamps and unemployed and about to be and was being evicted when I started or started running the largest shooting range in the state. I mean, overnight, boom, because I wasn't going to not do that. I mean, and so when I got there and I heard these guys talking, Will Smith said something about if you and I are on treadmills next to each other and I'm running, I will die before you beat me. He's like, I'm not going to stop. I will die before I let you win. And he's like, it's not because I'm like seriously competitive. It's because I'm not going to let myself fail. And that was on, it was like a quote of the day or something. Well, then the next one rolls over to Arnold Schwarzenegger saying kind of the same thing. And the next one's Will Smith again. And he's like, he says, I want, when I die, I want the world to be a better place because I was here. And I mean, that, that took my breath away. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing? I'm in this gang environment, acting like a shithead. People were probably afraid of me on some occasions. Like my family doesn't know what to do with me. So they just ignore me because they're afraid of me or they're ashamed of me. They don't know how to deal with an addict on this level. And not to mention how broken my family is because of this crazy shit that I've been doing. And, you know, I know we've talked about like dopamine and stuff and addiction. And, you know, it wasn't just the dopamine hits I was getting. It was, again, like I said previously, the man I saw in the mirror was a better man than I had ever been before. And that's what did it for me. And so it wasn't until that moment when I heard Will Smith say that I realized the world is officially a worse place because of me right now. There are children with futures that are going to be worse than they could have been if I wouldn't have been a fucker. Wouldn't have fallen into this bullshit addiction for no reason. And so that is when I started changing what I was writing about. That's when I started changing how I treated people. And then the next day, they rolled me up, took me to another state hold to make red space in that county jail. They moved me to another one, and this would hopefully be my last stop. Well, when I got there, there were some like-minded people there. Um, and then they bring in this fucking dude. He's from a different city. He's waiting to go back up to. This fucker walks in, and this dude's got tattoos all over his body, all over his face and shit. He's got horns right here, and he looks like MGK, and he laughs like a fucking, I don't even know. I don't want to get too offensive. This definitely a skinny queer, you know what I mean? Like, hey, and so again, at this time, I'm doing better every day. Like, I'm never going backwards at this point, and I know that about myself. I won't go backwards academically. I won't go backwards emotionally. I won't go backwards in anything. But what I will do is I'm going to paper check that dude when he comes into the room. I'm going to see why he's here. I'm going to make sure that everybody showers every day. I'm going to make sure that everybody works out every day. We're going to clean up after ourselves. We're going to take care of our environment. And so I'm running this tier for all these dudes that are waiting to go to prison. And this tall dude walks in. He's like 6'6", literally looks like MGK. And I jam him up. He gives me his papers, whatever. We're cool. He can tell that I'm the dude that's kind of making sure everything runs smooth in the tier. And he's like, "Well, hey, when do you guys work out?" And I was like, 3 times a day, brother, you know? And he's like, "Cool, I'll hit it once or twice with you." And, we're doing, I don't know, 1,500 to 2,000 push-ups a day. I mean, we're doing like 500 to 1,000 squats, um, and just killing ourselves. And after the first workout, this dude gives up, but he stays there. He's just doing whatever he can. And at the end of it, he's like shaking really bad. And he's like, "Fuck, man, I'm not going to be able to write tonight." I'm like, "Oh, you're a writer?" And he's like, "Yeah." And so we sat down later, and he showed me some of his writing, and it was literally almost word for word some of the shit that I've written. I was like, "This can't be a coincidence." And so I go bust out my papers out of my box, and this dude's story is so dangerously close to my story in life, that I can't even believe it, man. Instead of a gun store, he owned a tobacco store, a smoke shop. Instead of having 6 kids, he had 5 kids. Instead of growing up in Florida, going through all that crap, he grew up here going through it. And so seeing how similar his thought process was to mine at the time, and then we started collaborating and writing together, uh, I had more epiphanies writing with this dude, like being able to communicate with someone about these traumas and these pains that had been through it themselves was very therapeutic for me. And, I kind of had that turning point again where, in talking with this dude and collaborating with some of our poems and writing and stuff, where I started hyper focusing not on only fixing myself, but what do the 12 steppers say? Take inventory of your stuff and then like make amends for it. So I started writing gratitude letters instead of just writing in general. I started writing gratitude letters, and then I made lists of people who owe me apologies, who I owe apologies to, and people who owe me thanks, and people who I owe thanks to. And then I started developing writing systems. He taught me about systems that writers have. And he's like, I showed him my lists, and he's like, "Well, why do you think those people deserve, or why do you think you deserve a thanks from these people?" He's like, "Who are you to determine that?" And he's like, "Until you can answer that with a real answer, you should just throw that fucking list away." And so it was cool, man. And so then we got rolled up separately. I went to the prison first, and I I took a lot of the lessons I learned in that stay with me. And then 3 weeks later, my dad gets COVID and almost dies. And yeah, I mean that was like the next turning point.
Talk,
But
talk about that a little bit.
um, so I get to the prison, and because I have like a shit stick record in prison, like not it's not bad. Like it's just there's a point system in prison, that they've got a matrix that adds up your behavior, your past behavior, your charges, how many times you've been there, your age, all this, and then they give you a set amount of points.
Credit score or something, like a credit score.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, it's literally like your security points. And so I get to prison. I'm on lockdown because of my security points. And we're showering every 3 days. We get a phone once a week. Uh, they're short staffed. It's COVID. I've got high points. I'm not coming out of my cell for a while. And I'm cool with it. Like my bunkie was all right. He could have been worse, could have been better, but um, I still kind of worked out, not a ton because you can only shower so often. So you bird bath, but I didn't keep it up as much as I was. But I got through to my mom one time. She's like, "Oh yeah, we're going to Mexico for our anniversary." Blah blah blah. Call her a week later and find out that this huge dramatic thing happened. My stepdad's in the hospital. He might die. He's on his deathbed, basically, is the story I got. He was on ventilators and stuff. And I mean, he had single digit percentage chance of making it through it.
Yeah,
And
I remember that was so nutty.
yeah, dude. And
Yeah,
like,
like medevac or whatever from Mexico, like flown out of there, and it was all crazy. Like he
it
was
was crazy. Yeah, man.
dying. He was a goner.
Yeah, he was literally gone. And like, where the fuck am I at right now? Like, and me and him have never really seen eye to eye. He's a good man, but I was so broken that I didn't see. I didn't see what kind of dude he was. I didn't even see. I didn't even think that dude loved me. And it's not because like I don't even know. I don't even know why it was that way. It was just there was so much damage and trauma on my side that like um, I wasn't aware of what my reality was. I was very like insular and I very isolated. And
Self
so, huh?
kind of self-absorbed. You're saying?
Self-absorbed, yeah, because I didn't think that anybody was there for me, you know. So it's yeah, and the reality of it was he was always there for me. I mean, he was one of the only ones that was always there for me. But I was so like I had my blinders on and I could never see it. And so finally, this freaking cortisol and everything else just hits my brain so hard that like it flushed the rest of the meth residue out. I mean, that's what it felt like. Like I was so broken and scared and banged out this huge, like 60-page letter. And I mean, I wrote, boy, like, uh, you're in a cell for 72 hours and your bunkie doesn't talk to you because it's his first time there and like you're kind of rigid. So he just doesn't talk and you don't have books. So I sat at that desk and I burned through 2 pens in 3 sittings, you know, and um, yeah, man, I've never written him a letter before, um, and I've never told him how I felt before. And once I got that out, and then once I wrote a few other things on a deep level to my mom and to myself, like I wrote a letter to my mom about my real history, like every single little detail that I could remember from Florida to Utah to Nevada to Idaho. And because, my abuse didn't stop once Dewey went away, once my father went away. Uh, there was physical and sexual abuse all the way through Idaho. Um, and no one really knew that. And I decided I still have that letter in my stuff because something was telling me not to send my mom that detailed letter. Even though like I wanted her to know where my pain came from and where my trauma came from, because she had asked about it. But something was telling me not to send it, and I didn't send it. And then that, like 2 days later, is when I found out Nelson, my stepdad, was sick. So I'm glad I didn't send that to her because that would have just made her feel worse. But um, after writing all of those things, Nelson getting better, and then I got transferred to the biggest prison, which is like a gangland prison. Um, I was there for a while. I started obsessing over fitness again. I stopped writing as much. You can't really, you can't really, I mean, it wasn't a cell environment. And so I didn't want people like side hustling my shit, like reading my shit from behind my shoulder or whatever. I didn't want, you know, I wasn't trying to create problems. And somebody steps in my lane, like we're gonna have a problem. And so I just worked out a lot. Um, all the gang members and stuff welcomed me with open arms when I got back. Um, and it was cool, like to know that like I was accepted and like people, were excited to see me because that was a rarity in my life at this time. And it's sad that that was the place where people were excited to see me at. But um, you know, even even though my time could have been hella easy, as far as being comfortable and having a TV and all this other stuff given to me, I turned it all down and I told him, I was like, no, man, I'm trying to get to a minimum custody facility. I'm not trying to, you know, have anything that's not mine because I don't want to get pinched for it and then go back to medium. So I'm cool, and they offered ways to earn shit. And I don't know, I just kind of did my own thing.
So something that I have been thinking about just since we met 2 or 3 weeks ago about the prison thing. So it seems like it's obviously a very masculine place. I mean, it's orderly, it's boundaried, it's secured, it's structured. There's this uh schedule, there's all this kind of like firmness. And if that is corrections, if that's the correctional way, I wonder, it's just interesting that some people do figure it out at some point in prison and they have an opportunity to come out after. But this is this hyper masculine environment, not just the dudes there and all these gangsters and whatever. I'm talking about the system itself is very masculine. You know what I mean? It's just orderly. It's like there's just so much structure to it. And I'm wondering if that was a missing part in your life earlier, or in the men around you or whatever.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, so I did a really good job in my 20s of faking it, right? Like I knew what my perception of what being a man was. You take care of your family, you go to work, blah 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 blah. Like the cookie cutter definition of what it is to become a man, right? And I had certain influences, your brother and you and or your brothers and you and my stepdad. And so I took tidbits from everybody. I mean, fuck, I've always kind of been a shithead in that regard. Like my mom couldn't handle me. We moved to Idaho, so she sent me to Ogden to live with you. I mean, and I took little pieces from everybody, but just enough to kind of fake it until I made it. Um, and like the structure, I was very big in my 20s at my house and with my family. I was very big on structure because I think that I never came from that. My mom was working 2 or 3 jobs at a time. She was never there. My dad was a piece of shit and just like he was either never there or when he was there, it sucked. And, you know, I don't know. I think that's a big part of it. I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I just think like something that I would say is missing for men across the world, all men, is that they're not connected. They don't have dudes saying checking them. What did you say when the dude came in and you got him for his papers or whatever? You know, you're kind of like, we need that exact kind of confrontation sometimes. Sometimes we need that kind of like closeness with other dudes. And what if, I don't know, I just feel like I don't think typical men should be, incarcerated, but it's like, what if there's something to the idea of men being together more, men pushing each other around a little bit and saying, "Hey man, don't fuck around."
Well, yeah, man. And like, so you look at like veterans, right? A third of veterans do what when they get out? They go click up with a bike club, with a motorcycle club. They miss that brotherhood. They miss the camaraderie. They miss that. Um, you know, ex gang members, what do? They get involved with the Boys and Girls Club. They get involved with, reach out programs or outreach programs where they're always moving with a group to make shit better or to help these dudes uh shit. Look at me. Look at what I was doing. I get into prison. I've got the heart of a teacher, and I'm kind of a hard ass about it. And I heart check these dudes on the daily, not like the gang members do, but like I try and make them think about. I'm always lecturing those dudes when I'm in there about how to be better. And, you know, I'm big on like, so in there, dudes call women bitches. I don't do that. Like, you ain't gonna, like, we don't do that. You don't say that shit around me. And I've got a lot of old school values. And I was like, those are women. They're not bitches. Watch your motherfucking mouth. Like, and these kids would like look at me sideways sometimes, like, what are you talking about? I was like, have some fucking respect. And I was big on like teaching dudes about respect. And, when I went from the big prison to the little guy prison up in the mountains, beautiful area, we're literally nestled in these big, huge green mountains in Orofino, Idaho, at a place called Gibbons Hall. And there, I don't know, it's super majestic and it's crazy. It's a crazy place to have a prison. But you get there and you still got a lot of young cats there. And, we started this dog program, and that was one of the things that was I was big on was structuring that not only like a business, but almost like a boot camp too. Like you're gonna make your bed. There are these set rules. If you want to be a member of this, you're gonna hold yourself to a higher standard than everyone around you, or you can get the fuck out of here. And we're a more rigid group because we're in prison and we're trying to be better versions of ourselves. So you would think that, oh, those are the soft dudes. Those are the dudes that are a little bit softer because they're not gang members, they're not homies, they're not, those dudes are trying to be better people in general, so they're soft. No, we were some hard motherfuckers. Like, you want to be a real man, we're going to show you how to do it without doing dumb shit, getting slung out with tattoos and putting in work and whatever. You're going to strive to always be a better version of yourself while holding yourself accountable for life in general. And you're going to wash your ass, brush your teeth, make your bed. You're going to work the fuck out. You're going to read. Like, you're going to be better in every way. And, I never thought about the whole masculinity thing until now, I guess. But that's what we did. We created an obscene amount of structure within that program in order to be a part of it.
So that was kind of the criteria for guys to be included. They couldn't just be some knucklehead ass person who just likes dogs or whatever. They want some extra time. You had to like qualify for that. You made them kind of show up in all the ways that they could.
Yeah, man. So the process was it literally was ran like a business, dog. Like, so you had to apply. You go to the cop or one of the dog guys and you ask them for an application. Boom, you fill out an application. You come and you bring it to me. I grab the application. I wait until I get 10 or 15 stacked up, and then we conduct interviews. Now, I set it up so there's a board of 3 people on the leadership team. And when you come and do an interview, you schedule it with us and on whatever day. And then you come down to laundry. It's a closed door meeting, and it's me and 2 other, inmates that are interviewing this dude. He thought it would be like the sergeant or something. No, it's us. Like, and then once we screen him, then we kick his application to the sergeant and say, yeah, this dude's good. He does a soft background check to make sure he doesn't have some weird charges with animals or whatever, and make sure that he doesn't have any like disciplinary actions or anything for the past 6 months. And he'll send it back to laundry through the mail, the institution mail, and say okay on it. We call them down there. We tell them they got a spot. They do orientation, and we have bylaws. It's crazy. I wrote out a 3-thing page of bylaws, and we had an SOP. Yeah, and then we had them sign an agreement, and they had to agree to all of the bylaws. We're talking like it said shit in there like people in the pause or members of the pause team are altruistic, and it was very detailed. And if you fucked up and then once you got on, then you were assigned a job. And if you fucked up and you forgot to do your job on a day, if a dog ran out of food, because that was assigned to a team member, if you got a disciplinary action, if anything like that happened, you don't go to the cops. They don't just kick you out. You have to come back in front of the leadership team. We're going to talk about it, and we're going to figure out what the fuck you're going to do to make it right.
If you're a man that controls his own destiny, a man that is always in the pursuit of being better, you are in the right place. You are responsible. You are strong. You are a leader. You are a force for good. Gentlemen, you are the Alpha, and this is the Alpha Quorum.